What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do just that is Faraz SIddiqi of Upper Hand Fantasy. Faraz, what's going on, buddy?
Oh man, this is such an exciting time of year, man. Like it's busy, but this is probably my favorite time of the season, to be honest. Time of the year, to be honest with you, just because we're full on player takes. Preseason's here. We kind of get the usage. A lot of players that we're not used to seeing in certain spots, we get to see it now, and we get to overreact, which is what I love to do too. So I'm excited, man.
It is an exhausting but exciting time of the year. I would agree with that it is exciting. If nothing else, Faraz, then I mean you know this because you go so deep on the prospecting stuff just like I do. The fact that we're seeing Keandre Lambert-Smith make plays. We're seeing Isaac Tesla draw Puka Nacua, which is crazy, but Puka Nacua comparisons on the internet from his preseason action. It makes it all feel worth it. Like this is truly a justification of what we did in April. Even just that, even if it never becomes anything else in fantasy, even that makes us feel slightly glad that we did that work.
Yeah, 100%, right? And then you got, you have like some of these running backs too, kind of coming out of nowhere, and you're like, okay, well, we kind of did the legwork on this stuff. Like, are they actually good players? I think that's what a lot of us can go off of too, right? Like, are these guys actually good players? And some of these guys, I'll be honest with you, man, Keandre Lambert-Smith wasn't really on my radar that much. I saw Isaac Tesla at the Senior Bowl. His metrics didn't really pop out as much. But then, like, what are you showing on the field right now in the pros, in the preseason, in camp? The fact the Lions traded, a couple third-round picks to go get him. It's like you got to look a little bit deeper. So yeah, no, 100%, man. I'm glad we do that. It definitely adds a lot of context, but it doesn't beat what we're seeing on the field right now.
Well, you mentioned running backs and maybe taking a step forward. That's actually going to transition us to our whole topic today and also a little bit of news that we're going to get to off the top. Topic of the day is we are starting our boom or bust week on the pod. We're going full boom today. Faraz and I are going to try to identify 12 potential breakout players. We'll get to that in just a second because we do have 4 news items just to note here and one that I want to kind of sink our teeth into a little bit. Number one, we got confirmation that Matthew Stafford is able to walk around and do some football things. He was back at practice today for the Los Angeles Rams. So I definitely, and I'm sure you've been tweaking about this too, Faraz. I have definitely been worried about it. And I said it on the show yesterday with Justin Boone, the way that they set the like a Rams PR person kind of set the stage, Ram team official saying, Matthew Stafford still in practice. Sean McVay would address the situation on Monday. That made me really nervous the way that was phrased. But then if the addressing the situation is Matthew Stafford, I'm seeing him with my eyeballs like we are in the video right now. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. Seeing him throw passes to Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, that's a good way to address that situation. We also got Joe Flacco named the starter in Cleveland. That was as expected. I don't really think we have to dive too deeply on that. Also in a lessening our anxiety bit of news here, Justin Jefferson was back at practice today too. We just got video of him from Kevin Seifert of ESPN out there running some routes, so that was good to see as well. Did return to practice. Individual work, that's it. But it's progress. It's progress nonetheless. The one that I really want to dive into with you here, Faraz, before we kick off our breakouts, because hey, one of these guys we talked, maybe he might be a breakout, rookie running back from the Washington Commanders, because Brian Robinson is not playing tonight in the Monday Night Football preseason game, as he is a trade candidate right now. The rumors have been persisting. I think it was Ben Standig, formerly of The Athletic, I believe he has his own Substack now, was the first one I saw see that Brian Robinson could be a cut candidate. I was kind of shocked by that, but then other national reporters, such as Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network, have said, yeah, no, the Commanders are shopping Brian Robinson. So Faraz, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, otherwise known as Bill, which hell, I just love that. Just call me Bill. Love that. He has been a big time hype bunny in the fantasy football streets. So first of all, what was your reaction to the news that the Commanders are? I mean, it seems like a lock now at this point, going to part ways with Brian Robinson.
That's what it seems like. I mean, this is not just speculation anymore. I mean, if Brian Robinson's asking, not to play and the team is granting him that wish, that means it's pretty much locked in that, they are looking to shop him or he doesn't seem to be, in their plans. But, it makes sense. I mean, he's not somebody who was necessarily, an added, huge added value to the offense, right? It wasn't because of Brian Robinson they'll be winning games or going to be winning games this season. And it might go to show just like how well Bill is actually doing in training camp. I just had Josh Taylor on, he's a beat reporter for the Commanders for A to Z Sports on our podcast. And he basically said it himself that Brian Robinson is doing much of the same, but Bill is actually somebody who's popping in almost every single camp, right? He's making plays, all over the place. And I'm going to be really curious tonight to see what happens there, what this split looks like, how much of, those first team reps he's going to get alongside Austin Eckler. It's going to be really interesting. And, one thing about Bill is that, you kind of look back and you look at what these guys were as prospects in college. I took a look. Among 857 FBS running backs with 200 or more carries since 2014, 95th percentile after contact rate, 98th percentile missed tackle rate, and 97th percentile breakaway run rate. Now, obviously, didn't play, Power 4, Power 5 football, his entire career, but this is still worth something. Like, he could actually be good.
No, he wasn't without his fans during the NFL draft process. Like, he was not a name we didn't I didn't hear of his nickname Bill, but I heard the name Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt throughout the course of the draft process. And we knew this was going to happen with running backs in this year's class for us because it was such a deep group. Like, some guys were going to fall through the cracks, right? I mean, even a guy like Devin Neal was discussed as like a 4th round. He goes in the 6th round of the New Orleans Saints. Like, that was going to happen with this year's draft class. There's no question about that. And the thing that I feel I was joking with you before we got started that there was a couple times, even in like the Kings Classic draft at the Fantasy Football Expo, like I ended up taking, and the person sitting next to me can attest to the fact that I was just like, ugh, whatever, as I made the pick, just he's the top of my board. Literally, I was just, whatever, man. Yeah, Brian Robinson Jr., I'll go ahead and take him here. I feel like an idiot, though, for overlooking the fact that when the Commanders lost in the playoffs and throughout the course of the offseason, like leading to free agency in the draft, I kept saying, don't rule out running back as a team need. Like, we know the name Brian Robinson. We obviously know the name Austin Eckler, but from their after their week 14 bye and all through their loss in the conference championship game, the Commanders ranked 28th in EPA per rush on running back runs, 30th in percentage of running back runs that went for 5+ yards, and 27th in yards after contact per running back rush attempt. So that's not like Jaden Daniels removed from the equation here, just the running backs. Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, but especially Brian Robinson, really was not getting it done in that way. So I think obviously like a new face being involved here isn't a surprise for Oz. It's just the fact that the guy is a 7th rounder. I think that's why people have been sort of slow on the uptake with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt.
But also because he's a 7th rounder, we're so much more intrigued, right? And we have someone to root for now. And everyone's going to be rooting for him tonight. There's no doubt about it. I can't imagine anyone rooting against him tonight. I can see X going absolutely wild if something good happens tonight for Bill. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Brian Robinson Jr. was somebody that, he could have walked into 10+ touchdowns this year, if he was the starter. But it would have been just a simple, volume game, right? Which, a lot of running backs can fall into a lot of volume on a good offense, in a red zone role. It could happen. You never know. Hey, listen, I will say, Matt, for all of those shares you have of Brian Robinson right now, you never know. Maybe he lands in a spot, a couple teams could use a running back on early downs. Listen, a team that I think about is the Bears, somebody to complement DeAndre Swift, maybe, right? In that, little Jamal Williams, David Montgomery role. You never know.
Yeah, they were playing Deion Hankins was the guy that they were playing last night on the Sunday night. I was like, who is this guy? I mean, admittedly, like hand up, never heard of him. I knew about Kyle Manungai. Obviously, Roshan Johnson's been dealing with an injury. So yeah, no, that's a good call out there. Houston is also obviously dealing with a lot of running back issues as well. So there are some spots where Brian Robinson could get traded. And if you you could fall basically backwards into a decent fantasy pick if you drafted him like I did in a couple spots. But just last thoughts from me on the Commanders running backs. Obviously, if you're listening to this on Monday, you've already seen the preseason. But just for now, I've gone ahead and bumped both Bill and Austin Eckler to like running back 47, 48, the classic hedge ranking. Like we'll see how that kind of pans out there. We don't know what Brian Robinson is going to, like, if he's actually going to trade it or what. But if he does, I guess I'd bump those guys up a little further. But they're certainly like good late round picks right now that if I'm drafting teams, I would want to take them sort of on that late round range. Okay, let's get into the topic of the day, which is our breakout candidates here. Faraz, I will admit this to the audience. It's always tough with breakout players. Like, what is it? Like, who's a breakout? Whatever. It's not. We don't have a firm definition here, but we're looking for non-obvious guys, like non-highly ranked players, guys going in the early, 1, 2, 3, 4 rounds or whatever, but guys that are going to beat their ADP. That's at least how I look at it. And I will say, for a lot of your candidates here, I like a lot of them. So I'm going to try to play devil's advocate as much as possible here and maybe try to push back just to give a different perspective as much as I can, which will be tough for some of these guys. But your breakout candidate number 1 is a quarterback. Who is it, Faraz?
And I'll try to do the same. But my first guy is Drake Maye. And it's funny, I was kind of pounding the table for Drake Maye back in March once the Patriots signed Stephon Diggs. Like, Maye got himself a number 1 wide receiver. He got himself a real offensive coordinator. Just those two things alone compared to what he had as weapons last year and Alex Van Pelt as his OC, complete 180, right? And the real thing for me was the fact that Drake Maye in his full games last year, he was actually 4th in rushing yards per game. That was only behind Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and Jalen Hurts. And as we know, rushing matters a lot at the quarterback position. But the difference between what those other guys that I mentioned were getting that Drake Maye did not get was those designed runs built into the game plan. Each of those 3 guys had, over the course of the entire season, including the playoffs, 18% or above in designed rushing attempts. Maye was at 3%. Okay, so Alex Van Pelt, man, did not take advantage of that skill set at all. And it's funny because just the other day, Josh McDaniels came out and called that exact thing out. That he barely had design runs called. And I'm just like, thank you. Like, that just validated what I was saying. And it's coming straight from the OC last week. I also spoke to my guy, Tom Carroll, who's been at Patriots camp, right? And he's also telling me that McDaniel doesn't seem afraid to use Maye near the goal line in practice. He's letting him use his legs on scrambles. He's installing more design runs. So if he was able to average 18.7 fantasy points per game last year without that in his full games, I think he has a huge ceiling, given the change in scenery when it comes to, like I mentioned, offensive coordinator, weapons, more of an emphasis on the rushing ability. I think this is a season where Drake Maye can take a huge first step.
I like Drake Maye. I have him ranked as my QB 10 pretty much throughout the process. So look, I'm in on Drake Maye. Let me just get that out of the way right now. That being said, if I'm trying to push back here a little bit, Faraz, I'd ask you, how good does the offensive line need to be, and how good does the pass catching core need to be for Drake Maye to become? Because I think if we're going to call him a true breakout, I do think he has to be at or above where I've got him ranked, which is his QB 10 right now. How good does the pass catching core and offensive line have to be for him to get there, and what's your confidence level that can actually happen?
I have him as my QB 7 going into the year, and
wow,
it's super
even
aggressive.
More. Okay,
yeah, it's
super
aggressive. Yeah, no, I get it. It's super aggressive, but when I run the projection, I'm just like, this is really high.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. Yeah. But I think the offensive line, it could have its issues, but I think Drake Maye is going to be able to have more of that, ability to extend plays and be able to do the scramble a little bit more than he did last year. Mm-hmm. I think he'll be okay doing that. Now, as far as like the weapons go, I think Demario Douglas and him have a pretty good connection going into last year, right? We know that Josh McDaniels and him, could potentially be that next slot guy that Josh McDaniels, has been grooming over the years, mm-hmm. So I think, and not only that, Tom Carroll, who I just mentioned, he also said that Demario Douglas is that guy. He's like their clear slot receiver and could take another jump forward. So if you have Stephon Diggs, who by all accounts is looking like Stephon Diggs, like obviously not prime Stephon Diggs, but the clear alpha in the room and somebody who is like, when he's on the field, like he makes a huge difference. And then, the X receiver, whoever that's going to be, whether it's going to be Keyshawn Boutte or whether it's going to be Kyle Williams at some point, I think this is just an overall upgrade. Now, does it have to be this elite group? No. But I think this is a step above, a considerable step above what he had last year. I mean, think about can someone name his number one wide receiver last year? Like it was Hunter Henry and Demario Douglas, and it was like
Yeah.
super inconsistent from there.
Yeah, and I mean, just the fact that like we have Kyle Williams waiting in the wings here, I think that's a big deal. Kyle Williams is a guy I'm really high on, and I need to actually go back and take a look at Kayshon Boutte last year because I wasn't too big of a fan of him as a prospect, but I did. I think he played pretty well last year for them, and if he's holding off Kyle Williams in camp, if he's like keeping Matt Collins from being like an every down player at the X receiver spot, I think that's good news for him. But really, for us, like I think this does come down to from a pass catcher standpoint, it comes down to your view on Stephon Diggs and. I'm with you that I tend to be pretty positive about where he's at right now because I think this only needs to be like the 25th or something best wide receiver core and like pass catching group as a whole because Hunter Henry's still there, reliable veteran. We've got Travion Henderson who, is lighting up fantasy Twitter every single second. He's looks like a really dangerous pass catching weapon as long as like those guys are all good. Like it's a pretty good pass catching core. It's just, is Diggs enough is he at a form where he can be that true, maybe not number one, but the number one for this team? I tend to think that he can be. So ultimately, if you're optimistic about Drake Maye from a pass catching core standpoint, you also kind of have to be optimistic about Steph Diggs, which I am. It's just the like two rookies starting at left tackle and left guard. That makes me a little bit nervous. But again, I think Drake Maye could be a guy that does get you by on the fantasy floor because of the rushing, and then he's going to access the ceiling some weeks because he is just so talented. But I'll go to my quarterback here for my first breakout pick, which is Bryce Young. Like the more I've thought about this Panthers offense, the more excited I've gotten about the offense as a whole, which, I'm working on something for tomorrow's show talking about like, some offenses that we should be concerned about. So I was looking at a lot of different sources of just like, all right, where do offenses project out? Nobody's really projecting the offense in Carolina to be all that good. They're still like pretty low in terms of the overall projections, but this is one where I think we're kind of missing the boat because this is another room that looks pretty deep with options. Tedero McMillan, Jacob Gibbs pointed this out. He has been on the field for 100% of Bryce Young's dropbacks to target on 50% of Bryce Young's throws, which I think makes sense. Like you should be trying to get your number one rookie wide receiver totally in sync with Bryce Young. I think McMillan is going to be ready to rock from day one. Thielen is still playing well. We'll see what Leggett gives them. I'm a big Jalen Coker fan. They're really excited about Jatavian Sanders, who we probably need to just go ahead and put him at the starting tight end spot for this depth chart here. They go too deep in the backfield between Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle, two guys I think can play. And I think this is a more than functional offensive line. Better in the run game, the pass game for Oz, but still a more than functional offensive line. So typically, like, when I like an offense overall, but I don't quite know how some of the pieces are going to come together, which is how I feel about wide receiver 2 to 4 or 5 here, if you want to include Hunter Renfrow in the mix. Typically, I just think, all right, well, I just want the quarterback of that offense. So it brings me back to Bryce Young as a guy that I think could take a real leap in year 3 of his NFL career.
I'm with you. He's been one of those guys. Drake Maye has been a huge part of my draft plan where I would just forego quarterback and take Drake Maye in the double-digit rounds. But if I cannot get Maye, let's say I get sniped, I think Bryce Young is actually one of the quarterbacks I end up going with because of the fact that he does have some legs, right? He has a little bit of rushing ability to go along with that. Last 6 weeks, he was one of the best fantasy quarterbacks, among all fantasy quarterbacks. So he's, averaging more than 20 fantasy points per game. So that is there. And then you look at what Dave Canales has done with other quarterbacks, right? Like a little bit of a quarterback whisperer, right? So if he can kind of come in for this year with Bryce Young and take him to the next level, obviously this past preseason game, wasn't the best example of that. But listen, it's a preseason game. It's you can't say too much. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's one of those situations where you got the receiving core isn't that bad. You added a true number one talent, and you mentioned, the slot role, like with Adam Thielen. I feel like if Adam Thielen, he's an old man at this point in football years, but he has, Hunter Renfrow who can just slide into that role. So, I don't know if there's that much of a drop off there, if they were to lose him for whatever reason. And I think, there is a point where this offense could take the next step. especially Bryce Young's development with Dave Canales coaching him up.
Yeah, again, I'll talk about this on tomorrow's episode with Nate Tice. But like again, when I do kind of an aggregate of a bunch of different projections, they're projected to be like the 26th best offense in the league. They were way better than that last year. Like after week 10, from week 10 on, they were the 13th offense in points per game. So I think something's got to give there. I think the projections are just off because I think we're still underrating what Bryce Young did at the end of last season and how well he fits in this Dave Canales offense that just wants to attack that intermediate area. So all in all, Faraz, I love us highlighting these two guys to start here because if you're playing in super flex leagues, the number one guy I want to get as my QB2 is Drake Maye, who right now is still the consensus QB 15 in Fantasy Pros rankings, 106th overall ADP on Yahoo. Again, that's one quarterback kind of standard ADP. So obviously in Superflex is going to go way earlier than that. But if he's still viewed as QB 15, he could easily be your QB2 in Superflex. And if it doesn't work out with a guy like Drake Maye, then I'm starting to think about the Bryce Youngs or the Trevor Lawrences. And like we've seen Lawrence be a QB1 in a low end, but a QB1 in fantasy. And I think Bryce Young, man, he could be that type of candidate this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. You know, I have the jury, like the jury's still out for me when it comes to Trevor Lawrence.
Sure.
Like if he can't do it this year in the Liam Cohen offense, you know, with the weapons that he has, right? And I'm a big Travis Hunter guy, right? And I really feel like, you know, this is his year, right? And I'm hoping that they give him a real option out of the backfield in terms of, you know, a real receiving option, you know, because, you know, if they're rolling out Tank Bigsby a ton like they did this past week, like, you know, well, he did catch a pass, you know what I'm saying? Like he did do something there. Maybe there is something, a little bit of a unlocked skill that we could potentially get, like a video game, right? Like you have these characters where you didn't know they have these skills, and all of a sudden you unlock a skill, like, oh my God, he can catch the football.
He unlocked the hands upgrade for Oz, like the hands package, right? He's upgraded the weapons there. He's got a pair of hands now.
Exactly. So, you know, I you know, he is one of those, Trevor Lawrence is one of those, you know, quarterbacks that I'm like, I want to pick because I really believe in Liam Cohen. But it's tough right now after what we've seen lately.
All right, well, those are two quarterbacks we expect to break out. Love highlighting those guys for Superflex leagues. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk through two running backs we think can take a step forward in the 2025 fantasy season right after this. All right, we are back. We're going to talk through running back breakout candidates here in this next segment. And Faraz, listen, you're here on the show. I'm really happy you're here. I got to call you out just a little bit for cheating with your pick here of RJ Harvey. Are rookies eligible to be breakouts? Because, like, Yeah, I mean, what are they breaking out from? You know what I'm saying? That's my one question about your pick of RJ Harvey. Otherwise, I'm really excited to hear you break this guy down.
Hey, listen, I had the same questions, but then what do you do for guys like Brock Bowers, who broke out his rookie year, or Zeke or
True.
Saquon, right? Like, these guys just go nuts and become, like top 10, top 5, top 2, players at their position. So yeah, it's a breakout, Matt. That's what it is.
Yeah, I know. Listen, you know what? You're right. I mean, frankly, we've got people talking breakout ages for prospects, like Malik Neighbors. He broke out as a 19-year-old, whatever, this, that, and the. So you know what? I guess I should just shut the hell up and let you talk about the player. So I'm gonna stop. You go ahead and tell us why RJ Harvey's a great fantasy pick this year.
Oh man! All right. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where I was a fan of Harvey as a prospect, okay, but then he goes to the Sean Payton system, and I'm just like, oh, like, okay, like, here we go. It's just an example of talent meeting opportunity in the system that you want that opportunity in, right? So you start with the talent, right? You have, if you look at the just qualifying collegiate running back careers over the last 10 seasons, okay, super elusive. 96th percentile missed tackles forced per rushing attempt. 94th percentile missed tackles forced per reception. Staying on receiving for a second. 88th percentile yards per route run. And then back to the run game. 98th percentile breakaway rate. And those are runs broken for more than 15 yards. 88th percentile after contact in the ground game, which we saw quite a bit of in this last preseason game. After the first preseason game, everyone's worried about him bouncing it outside. I think he reads Twitter because if he didn't, he wouldn't have, he would have just kept bouncing things outside. He was running literally straight through the tackles, and he has it in him. So good football player. Okay. Then you get the second round draft capital where you love to see it. And he's getting the usage that you want in the preseason. First preseason game, he starts out of the gate. And speaking of gate, I think we have a helmet gate on our hands here with J.K. Dobbins. Apparently he couldn't find his helmet to start. That's the conspiracy theory for all the, J.K. Dobbins stands and the Harvey haters. But either way, I think, Harvey was the primary running back regardless, even after he quote unquote found his helmet. But, Harvey pretty much got all the work himself in this past game. Dobbins had a little bit of a veteran rest day, which is really interesting in a Sean Payton offense where we usually see like several backs get work. So the fact that Harvey pretty much had all the work to himself in this past preseason game with the ones was like pretty interesting to me. So it looks like he's getting the opportunity to be one of the top 2 backs on this team. And whether he's the RB1 or the RB2, like, it kind of doesn't matter. Obviously, you would prefer him to be the RB1, but from a breakout perspective, like, the RB2 on Sean Payton's offenses, like, hats tip to Scott Barrett on this one. Over his last 19 seasons, the RB2s on Sean Payton's offenses have averaged 13.4 PPR fantasy points per game, right? So, like, there's still a chance, like, there's also still a chance he's getting the majority of work this year. And you look at the few of the RB2s Payton has had, obviously Kamara being one of them, during the Mark Ingram years, Darren Sproles, like, these guys were top 5 fantasy running backs at times, and they had 120 carries or less. Because why? Because Sean Payton's offenses, they've been top 5 in target share to the running back position in 7 of his last 11 seasons as a play caller, including last year. And, like, who do they have? Right? Javonte Williams, like, they were 4th in total targets to the running back position last year. So, Harvey going off the board as the RB25 on Yahoo, I just think that's his absolute floor right now.
That last point that you made there about the pass catching is why I almost don't care about J.K. Dobbins at all. And I know that sounds crazy to say because, like, look, if the guy is going to be – if J.K. Dobbins is going to be on the field and he's going to be there, like, throughout the course of the season, he obviously limits the theoretical ceiling of R.J. Harvey. But I do think that ceiling of, like, R.J. Harvey dominating and being, like, the clear running back one, I do think that was only ever a theory for Oz because Sean Payton always wants to have a second, if not a third running back in the mix here. I do think it's just going to pretty much be between these 2 guys here in the backfield, Harvey and Dobbins, which this is an offense that people project to be pretty good this year in Denver. And I agree. Like, I do think this is an offense that will be at minimum around, like, the middle of the league. And I think they have a ceiling to go even higher than that. So I want to invest in the backfield here, but it is, again, it's the pass catching for RJ Harvey that matters here a lot. Bo Nix last year, you mentioned the target shares for running backs. Bo Nix last year was 4th in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus in yards on screens. A lot of those were to Marvin Mims. I think RJ Harvey is probably going to take a good chunk of those as well. So definitely somebody that I think can get a boost in that way. And also, I've quoted this stat 100 times since the Broncos season ended. The Broncos last year were 10th in yards before contact on their running back runs. They were bottom 5 in yards after contact. So there is a lot of room for RJ Harvey to go here. He is definitely somebody in that like 5th round range that I think makes a lot of sense. Where are you kind of targeting him right now in drafts?
It's one of those things. You look at the opportunity and like the games throughout this preseason, and you're looking at guys like Breece Hall falling a little bit, right? But like I love Breece Hall as a player and as a talent, but the Jets offense was probably going to really stink, right? You have a couple other running backs emerging here in that backfield. So like if I'm looking at the offense, the quality of the offense, like you mentioned, the quality of the offensive line that you mentioned, and then all this opportunity in a good offense in a scheme that you want. And the vibes are just really, really good here, right? So I'm going to take RJ Harvey here, right, all day long over guys like Breece Hall, which is if I heard myself say that a couple months ago, I'd be like, are you crazy? But I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I just moved Breece Hall down to RJ Harvey's tier. I still have Hall one spot ahead at the top of that tier, but I'm looking at those two tags and I'm trying to flip them here. Like I really want to get myself to do it. So you are not helping the fact that I might get myself to do that there. Also not helping is the fact that my breakout candidate, it transitions us perfectly here. It's Jets running back Braelon Allen, who right now over the last 7 days, his ADP in Yahoo drafts is 128. His consensus ADP, industry wide, is 143rd. Not in best ball sites, just true redraft sites. Like 143rd overall player, Braelon Allen. I think he's beaten that ADP somehow. And again, I think it is well within the range of possibilities here that this just becomes Braelon Allen's backfield. He's big. He's explosive. He is a super young player too, so you'd like to think that there can be some incremental growth in his own skill set. And based on preseason usage, and like this is one thing. If it was just preseason usage, like the whole, hey, Brock Bowers is splitting reps with Michael Mayer, I don't think we need to take that seriously. But when it's preseason usage that also is backed up by everything that has come out of Aaron Glenn's mouth since he took this job, which is, we think we have 3 really good backs here and we're going to use all 3 backs and it's going to be a committee. Like, why can't Braelon Allen be the lead dog in this committee here for Oz? Because like Breece Hall did not have a good season last year, period. End of story. So I'm not really like all that jacked up about the Jets offense at this point in the proceedings. But if I'm taking a player from this offense, and I do think the run game is going to be good, even if they don't score a lot of points, why would I not just want to take the guy that is going deep in the 100s as opposed to the guy that's still a top 40 pick on the board in Breece Hall?
Matt, I can't get on board with you on this one, man. I really can't. Like Braelon Allen, I get it. Like he's young, he's big, he's fast. He can run through big offensive holes, really fast and explosive. I get it. Like I just don't think he's anywhere close to the talent Breece Hall is. And Breece Hall, he was dealing with the knee. And I'm gonna seem like a Breece Hall apologist here, and like I get it, flame me. I totally get it. But like I really think Breece Hall he had a knee injury last year. The splits in terms of efficiency before and after the knee injury was real. He wasn't that bad last year in terms of efficiency. But you know who was bad in terms of efficiency? Braelon Allen, man. Braelon Allen had 90 carries last year. Among 47 running backs with 90 carries, he was 33rd in yards after contact per attempt. Breece was 16th with 209 carries, right? If we increase the threshold to 23 running backs with 200 plus carries last year, Breece was 7th in that category. And, 20th, he was 20th of those 23 yards before contact per attempt. So, like, he didn't get a lot of help. So, yes, Braelon's a big guy. On top of that, out of the 47 qualifying running backs, he was 40th or 47 in missed tackles forced per attempt, So honestly, I kind of like Isaiah Davis. Very small sample size last year, but he was very, very efficient. And if you look at the FCS running backs who were coming out, when he did come out, he was number 1 in like almost every efficiency metric, and he was really, really good coming out the FCS. If you're gonna evaluate FCS anybody, wide receiver, running back, they better really, really stand out, among their, competition. And he did. But, I think where Braelon Allen could end up having value is like at the goal line, those type of situations. But like how often, A, are they going to get to the goal line as the Jets offense? And B, how often is Justin Fields going to be stealing those goal line attempts, right? Those are my issues there. So like, I get the intrigue and I understand, like, even as a handcuff, I'm still not convinced that he is going to be the cleared guy to have, between him and Isaiah Davis. Like, that's where I'm at right now in this backfield. So I get it. And I know he's super young. And even when he was coming out of college, he was also not the most efficient running back either. And I know numbers aren't everything and all that, but I just, and he has a long way to go. I think the one thing that is working in his favor is the fact that he is super young and he has a lot of chance to develop here, in the NFL. And I think that's something that, could be to his benefit.
Yeah, I also think the Jets' run game last year was just so bad that we kind of maybe need to throw out all of like the efficiency stuff, because I think it's going to really be different this year in terms of the design of it and like how condensed things will feel. That was a very spread out kind of old school West Coast system last year under Nathaniel Hackett. I do think this is going to be a little more modernized, but quite frankly, Faraz, I think it's good that you push back on me there, because we can't just sit here and agree throughout the whole show, and everybody else that you've got coming up, I'm going to really, really, really struggle to push back on you on. So it's good that we didn't just sit here and agree the whole time. And honestly, if I could be totally transparent, that was my like least enthusiastic pick, was the Braelon Allen one. So I'm okay if that's the one that we don't totally agree on. We're going to take another quick break here. When we come back, like I said, Faraz has a lot of exciting picks left. I've got some as well, some guys that you're going to want to draft here over the next few weeks. We're going to get to more breakout candidates on the other side of this quick break. All right, we are back. Faraz, SIddiqi, and I are continuing to run through our breakout candidates for 2025. We had a little bit of disagreement. Not a lot of pushback on me on a Jets running back, that's for sure. Faraz hammered me for my last pick. I wish I could say, Faraz, that I was going to give it right back to you on this next pick, but I cannot. I cannot. Tucker Kraft, Green Bay Packers, your next breakout candidate. Tell the people why Tucker Kraft is a badass.
Everybody's fighting for, like, okay, who's going to be the Packers wide receiver to draft, right? And I'll be honest, like, I'm a big Jaden Reed guy, but yes, like, same. I am, I guess, a little concerned about the fact that they run a lot of 12 personnel. Not, if you're really banking on someone to break out, like, he kind of has to be on the field, a lot, right? Or at least like on a far majority of the players. You want like a 80-85% route participation, especially for a wide receiver. Like even for a tight end, you want it to be like 80% plus, right? And we saw that, right? Luke Musgrave early on, like in their careers, they got drafted back to back, and I was surprised that okay, they drafted Musgrave, but I was a Tucker Kraft guy. Like I actually liked that pick. I said, hey, like I think Tucker Kraft can be the better pick, in better the more fantasy relevant option as a better pass catcher. So when Musgrave started to catch some momentum early on, I was a little surprised. Actually, no, I wasn't surprised because I'm wrong all the time. But at the same time, Tucker Kraft is somebody who, I'm happy, he's getting that opportunity now. After the season, their head coach who basically said that they need to get the ball more, in Tucker Kraft's hands, and for good reason. He was first among tight ends, qualifying tight ends in missed tackle rate. He was first in yards after the catch rate, and that wasn't close at all to from first to second place. He was second in yards per reception. He was second in passer rating generated, only behind George Kittle last year. He was fourth in route participation, which is a huge. I think you look at that number and you're like, okay, well, the targets will follow, given the efficiency that he had last year. Sixth among 23 qualifying tight ends in yards per route run. He was sixth in fantasy points per route run, only right behind Brock Bowers, which is an interesting one. And he's going into his age 25 season, and that's when appreciate fantasy points in this one. Ryan Heath, put out a great article about tight ends, like, and when their peak season is. That's an age 25 season. So I think that this is the year for him. And when you look at the wide receivers, it's so ambiguous there. But I think the one spot that isn't as ambiguous is Tucker Kraft.
I love that you highlighted the fact that, yes, among tight ends, he was fourth in route participation. He was right. I mean, we're talking about like the best players in the damn sport up there at this particular position. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce. Number 4 is Tucker Kraft. He's the only other guy above 78% last year in terms of routes per team dropback. So as we're all talking here for us, but wow, man, can Jaden Reed get on the field in 2 receiver sets? Like, how much is Matthew Golden going to play as a rookie? Romeo Dobbs, all these guys are kind of banged up right now. The one guy who's never leaving the field is Tucker Kraft, who's a really good football player who deserves more work. And to me, Faraz, I don't know like how you've approached the tight end position structurally. I have just not ended up with very many, not by like design. I just haven't ended up with very many early tight end teams because I'm pretty attracted to the first like tier of quarterbacks, which is the Lamar, the Josh Allen, the Jaden Daniels. Those guys often slip to round 3. Usually Bowers and McBride don't. So, and I hate the round 3 like wide receivers. So I've really been gravitating to those quarterbacks a lot. So I don't end up with the early tight ends very often. And then like when I just look at the rest of the tight end board, all the way from Sam Laporta all the way to Evan Ingram, pick like 50 to 80. I just don't see the appeal of those guys over Tucker Kraft all the way down right now. Yahoo ADP last 7 days, 93rd overall. Like, forget about that middle tier and just start picking shots at the last tier, which Tucker Kraft leads that tier by a wide margin to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, I've also, similar to you, I haven't been taking a lot of those elite tight ends, but I have been trying to notice when they fall. Like if Chase Brown's off the board, I'm like, okay, where is Trey McBride, right? And I'll see if he fell a little bit. And if not, it's okay. Like George Kittle, like he could end up being the number 1 overall tight end again for the second straight year. Meanwhile, he's drafted as a tight end 3. Sometimes he falls a little bit because people like to take the wide receivers and running backs in that range. And if not, I kind of go all the way down. Evan Ingram, I'm kind of interested in, so I'll look at him if he falls. It's just a game of like which tight ends are falling and who's on the board at that time, because I'm okay grabbing a lot of these guys. Tyler Warren is another one who's in that Tucker Kraft tier, I think, who I'm totally willing to grab based on the preseason usage, based on the talent profile, based on the fact that what I'm hearing is that both Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones are looking for him, and they're looking for him deep down the field, especially Anthony Richardson, and then Tucker Kraft, right? Also kind of in that tier. So, I'm open to a lot of these guys, but at the end of the day, I love the value that Tucker Kraft presents.
Absolutely. Just such a big fan. He's ended up on an awful lot of my teams. All right. We're going to stick in the NFC North for my next breakout candidate, which is Vikings running back Jordan Mason. Extremely excited about Jordan Mason last year because I think he kind of actually can continue on the breakout path that he started last year, like weeks 1 through 7. Jordan Mason was right up there. Excuse me, weeks 1 through 6, he was second in the NFL in rushing yards, second through weeks 1 through 7 as well, behind only Derrick Henry. It's like, okay, well, you didn't pass up Derrick Henry. We can forgive you for that. So he was second in the NFL in rushing yards in that span among running backs. And he has been labeled the 1B back to Aaron Jones. Well, they've just kind of said this is a 1A, 1B throughout the course of the offseason. There's a chance I think Mason could just end up leading this team in carries because I think he really fits where the Vikings want to go from a run game perspective here for Oz, which look at the 3 guys they added this offseason. We're showing it on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries. Those are some big freaking boys in the middle of that offensive line there. And the Colts ran a lot of like gap scheme runs. And this always happens with these Shanahan, McVay acolytes, right? They get to a new spot. They immediately like, all right, well, what we know how to teach, we know how to install back and front is outside zone. We're going to hammer the outside zone stuff. And then if they're lucky enough to hang around and kind of continue to evolve, we've seen the Godfathers, McVay and Shanahan, both install more gap scheme runs, like more at-you power concepts. I think that's where the Vikings want to go. I think that's what they've told us with their offseason moves. And if you look at Jordan Mason, according to Fantasy Points data, 5.65 yards per carry on gap runs in 2024. Again, I just think it's clear where this run game wants to go. And I don't totally hate taking Aaron Jones when he falls, especially in PPR formats, because I think he will be the primary pass catcher of the two if they're both healthy. But I think Jordan Mason's a guy who could score 8+ touchdowns. If we expect this Vikings offense to be good, I think they still will be good this year, as long as J.J. McCarthy's like functional, which every quarterback is functional in this offense because Kevin O'Connell's so good, these players are so good. Why would I not be attracted to Jordan Mason as a breakout candidate at running back? Is this one you're ready to push back on for Oz?
Can't push back on this one, man. I can't. I'm kind of on board with you. And I think one of the points that you mentioned of him potentially being the 1A at some point, especially on the ground, can definitely happen. Like you look at their numbers last year, among 31 running backs with 150 or more carries, Aaron Jones was 27th among those 31 in missed tackles forced per attempt. Jordan Mason was 5th. In yards after contact per attempt, Aaron Jones was 11th among the 31, which is pretty good. But Jordan Mason, 3.07 yards after contact per attempt. That was second among those 31 running backs. Explosive run rate, 7.8%. That was second only to Jahmyr Gibbs for Jordan Mason. That was right ahead of Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. Jones was 27th in explosive run rate. And in terms of yards, rushing yards over expectation, third among all running backs with 90 or more carries last year. That was only behind Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. So, yeah, it's pretty good. That's pretty good company. Obviously, he was in a great offensive environment in San Francisco, but so was Aaron Jones, So I think Aaron Jones, you look at what he did last year, he had 0 top 5 finishes last year, despite playing in every game. And Mason had 2 top 5 finishes last year, despite only having 6 games as the guy, right? 300-yard rushing games. So, like you mentioned, like he was killing it on the ground. So, and what I'm hearing out of training camp as well, I heard Tyler Forness on the podcast, beat reporter for the Vikings, and they're not shy about throwing it to Jordan Mason, in the pass game either. Like he's not just limited to the ground game. So if he can get a little bit of receiving, like if he can get like 35 catches or something like that on top of whatever he's getting on the ground, I think we're looking at a potential, solid RB2 week in and week out.
Yeah, no question. And if anything ever happens to Aaron Jones, knock on wood, because Aaron Jones is such a great guy and he's been a great player for a long time. I mean, Jordan Mason would be a guy that is like a running back 1 in fantasy football. We've already seen the proof of concept based on everything that you just laid out from last year. And the fact that he is getting some pass catching work, that's really good insight from you on that one. All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to go to the wide receiver position. We're going to talk through 2 guys that I absolutely love. So I'm going to try to devil's advocate on this one. I don't know if I'm going to succeed, but you will have to wait to find out right after this quick break. All right, we are back. Faraz, we're continuing to run through our breakout candidates for 2025, and this next one, I gotta be honest with you, pal. I'm gonna try to push back on you. I'm gonna try to maybe play devil's advocate, but at the same time, I read an annual draft day blueprint piece for the Yahoo website, and this was the guy I said I want in every single draft. So gonna be tough. But go ahead and tell the people why you like this next breakout candidate.
It's George Pickens, and I'll say this: anyone who's been following me over the last few years knows that I've never really been a George Pickens guy. I've always fought back against it, and Deontay Johnson was a big reason why, and like Deontay Johnson's like, fall off like needs to be studied. You know what I mean? It's crazy like where he was just a year ago. Like how I was talking about Deontay Johnson as like the guy in Carolina. Oh my goodness, like you got to draft him.
Dude, he was targeted on 27% of his routes with the Panthers before he got traded. 27%. Like what are we talking? And I don't even know why he's on the Browns at this point. Like I actually don't think he's going to make that team, but it's a whole nother conversation.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And the fact that, and that's really the reason why, because the Steelers had a true target earning wide receiver on that team. And I never thought that Pickens had enough versatility in his game, especially short intermediate, route, at least how they used him to be able to say that, okay, he is going to be an every week consistent wide receiver, but he really depended on those big plays. Now, on the Cowboys, I think that could be a good thing for him because I think the complement between George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb might be one of the best complements among any wide receiver duo in the NFL. Yeah. Like you look at what CeeDee Lamb does out of the slot, short, intermediate, middle of the field, all those type of routes. And then you have George Pickens, running deep, potentially taking those safeties away, and now CeeDee Lamb like is going to eat underneath. I mean, in that intermediate range, and the opposite plays as well, where if safeties, are going to be paying attention to CeeDee Lamb, like George Pickens is going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities down the field. Not only that, this offense is not built to run the ball. Like Javonte Williams, they're like content with Javonte Williams as their running back one right now. He's the one who got the rest day in this past preseason game with Miles Sanders and these guys like playing. And I don't think Blue is going to be somebody who really makes a huge impact in the ground game. I think he's a better receiver than a runner. So you add George Pickens here. They made that big move to get him. And I think you can look at the comp. You look at Dak Prescott as a quarterback. You look at his strengths and then you look at Pickens' strengths. I just think that it's a really like a match made in heaven almost. Pickens was first in yards per route run last year among wide receivers on targets 20-plus yards down the field, right? That's his strong suit. And Dak, he's been one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL, right? Like his last healthy season in 2023 on throws 20-plus yards down the field, he was second in accuracy, passer rating, and touchdowns. Not only that, he was first in completions too. And Pickens was tied for first in receptions of 20-plus yards last year. I think he was tied with DK Metcalf, if I'm not mistaken, his former teammate for 5 minutes. But so, by all accounts, like in camp right now, he's having a great rapport with Dak. He's one of the standouts in camp. So I just think that the fact that he's being drafted, his ADP is pretty much the same it's been over the last couple of years, and I think his situation's improved. So for all the people who got kind of burned by where they took him last year, it wasn't me. But this year, I'm pulling the trigger.
12th among all wide receivers last year to run 200 plus routes and yards per route run against man coverage. So we've already seen him be a productive player in what they're going to ask him to do, which is play X receiver and win against man coverage. And that's backed up by a big step for Oz in reception perception, success rate versus man, and press coverage. Last year got over 70% for the first time in his career. And I'm with you, man. And I've said this on the show as I've been talking about George Pickens is a great fantasy pick this year. I've called him the most mispriced player in fantasy throughout the course of this offseason. We're finally starting to get an ADP correction. He's up to 56 overall in Yahoo drafts right now. He's the 10th biggest riser over the last 7 days. It still needs to go higher. Like I think there's a really good chance he could outproduce some of those like round 3 to 4 wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, those type of players. Like I mean, Terry McLaurin, if he gets off to a slow start, Tyreek Hill, if Tyreek Hill continues the Tyreek Hill trajectory, but all throughout that, like, stretch, I same as you, I've been saying I've never been like a full-on George Pickens believer until last year, because I really think he didn't do it the full season because he just wasn't consistent throughout the course of the year because he was doing some George Pickens stuff. But he did really take a step forward as an individual player last year, and the environment didn't cooperate. Like the way you get one of these number 2 wide receivers to outproduce more highly drafted number 1s like a Garrett Wilson or some of those type of players is that they just play for an offense that throws the ball a lot and scores a ton of touchdowns, which is what I think is going to happen here in Dallas. I said it all along. Why can't he be the T. Higgins to CeeDee Lamb's Jamar Chase? I think that's very possible in this environment. One little hang up, again, just to play a little devil's advocate here, is, again, I keep referencing these kind of wisdom of the crowd sort of projections I put together that we'll talk about on tomorrow's show. Dallas actually was a little lower than I thought. They were 18th, like in these 3 sources I collected together, like projections in terms of where their offense is going to finish. I thought that was surprising, but I kind of tend to think they'll be better than that. Do you have any concerns about Dallas as an ecosystem overall?
One thing that's interesting to me is I think their defense is going to not be as good. And I think, there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there. And because of that, I think they're going to just have to throw the ball. Like, even though I think they're going to be a little bit leaning towards the pass anyway, even in neutral situations, there could be a case where like they're passing the ball like late in games. So I think the points are going to be there on the offensive side of the ball, like whether they're a good team overall or not. Like, that remains to be seen. But 18th, okay, I can see it. Like, I would have maybe guessed, 14th, 15th-ish, like, middle of the pack. So, like, not too far off. But I think, the all the production is probably going to come in the passing game and not a whole lot in the run game. So, like, maybe it'll be a little bit lopsided in that respect.
Yeah, and we got to monitor tackle injuries, too. Tyler Guyton, Terrence Steele, those guys have been banged up. That's probably the one way that this offense could really sink. One offense that I think is going to soar this year is the San Francisco 49ers, and one wide receiver that I think is going to soar with it is one Pearsall. Richard Pearsall is going to just take off this year, man. I keep bumping him up the rankings to try to stay ahead of ADP, but it is getting harder. He's 9 spots ahead from last week's ADP, 4th biggest riser of the week on Yahoo, 98th overall. I am still hammering Ricky Pearsall as the 98th overall pick. He is like one of my favorite guys to take in that 8th to 9th round range, depending on your format. Faraz, I just straight up think like people did not watch how he played at the end of last year. They're kind of looking at some of the per route metrics and stuff like that, but this guy was smoking man coverage at the end of last season. He was just on fire from a film perspective. He has a unique singular role. I think that's another thing that people don't understand. Like, he was not drafted to be Deebo Samuel's replacement. He was not drafted to like replace Brandon Ayuk had he got traded last season. He was drafted to play a very singular, specific Ricky Pearsall designed role. And as this team kind of goes away from some of the under center play action, typical Shanahan stuff that we've seen in San Francisco, and they go more towards like true drop back stuff, like spread the field out a little bit and try to find mismatches with motion and guys that are true route runners down the field, like Ricky Pearsall is a big part of that. You could see it for Faraz. I remember saying this even before before he was producing, just like charting him when he first got on the field in that week 7 game against Kansas City, where he looked not good because he was coming back from being shot in the freaking chest and didn't participate throughout the whole offseason. Like you could see he was a little bit swimming. He was running like whip routes, return routes, some deeper stuff that, Purdy at one point, just like it took him a minute to get in sync with that. But when he did, those guys were on fire towards the end of the year. Pearsall picked his play up. And I know this is stupid, and I am curious what you think of Pearsall. And I know this is stupid, Faraz. I'll throw it to you with this. When I saw Pearsall get that target down the field against the Raiders in the preseason game where he's running that deeper dig route and Purdy has let that thing go before he's even out of that 90-degree break on the inside, I'm like, oh, that's it. Move him up a tier. Move him up a tier in fantasy because let me tell you what, if Purdy trusts you on that anticipatory dig route, it's over. You've got his trust. You've locked it in because I can remember him dialed in like that with Brandon Ayuk towards the end of the 2022 season, and that became his guy in 2023 when Ayuk was one of the most efficient receivers in the NFL. I just think those guys, like the connection that those guys have is really going to butt into something special this year. So, wide receiver 36 in consensus rankings. I'm trying to be a little bit ahead of that. I'm trying to be ahead on him in Dynasty. And again, just one of my favorite late round picks right now is Ricky Pearsall.
I was wondering what Matt Harmon was thinking when that happened in that preseason game. I was like, Matt Harmon must be on cloud 9 when he saw that, man.
I was. Never felt better.
I mean,
second happiest moment of my life.
What was the first, man? I thought this was the first. I mean, I don't know. Like, it must have been Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah. It was when I saw the deep dig. No, it was definitely like getting married or something. I don't know, but might have been like the first deep dig to Ayuk in 2022.
Right.
That was probably it.
Well, I mean, the last season, like at the end of the year, obviously Juwan Jennings was like, I think he had like 10 targets in like the first not even the first half before he got kicked out the game in week 18. But Ricky Pearsall, 6 for 69 in a touchdown that week. The week before, 10 targets, 8 catches, 141 yards in a touchdown. So started to show that promise, right? And that's kind of the same time that Xavier Worthy, right, started to pop off, right? Xavier Worthy, remember, he didn't really pop off until that portion of the season. And the 49ers didn't make the playoffs, so there was nothing else after that. But Xavier Worthy had a lot of his, his really big games in the postseason. Now, look where Xavier Worthy's being drafted, right? And given the Rashee Rice situation, there's a lot of, who knows what's going to happen there. But look at the 49ers situation. Juwan Jennings, he re-aggravated the calf injury, which not only is he out, has he been out entire training camp, but he has according to the fantasy doctors out there, there's a little bit of an increased, chance that he gets hurt again, and increases his chance of injury going into the season. And look at the rapport that they're building, right? 57% target share in this past game, 4 targets, 3 catches, 42 yards. Brock was just looking for him nonstop. Absolutely looking great in that connection. I think he's an actual better wide receiver than Juwan Jennings. To be honest with you, if Juwan Jennings never got hurt, I think there's a chance that Kyle Shanahan would have just kept on, dialing things up for Jennings because it was working. But I think going into the season now, I think they're at the point now of no return where Ricky Pearsall is going to be their guy. Brandon Ayuk not going to be ready until week 6. There could be a ramp-up period at that point. Even before, for whatever reason, last year, Ayuk was only averaging less than 4 catches per game, even when he was healthy, for whatever reason. But I think it's really going to potentially be the Pearsall and George Kittle show, this season, especially early on. And if he continues to show out, I don't see any reason why Pearsall isn't one of the mainstays on offense. We've seen this offense produce several good receivers at the same time. And I think Pearsall, regardless of whether Ayuk comes back, Jennings comes back, can really outproduce his ADP by a mile.
I love that Xavier Worthy comparison that you made there because, they're 2 guys that were first-round picks, not consensus first-rounders, but they were first-round picks in the NFL draft. And if you just look over the course of their season, they actually have 1.32 yards per out run for Ricky Pearsall, 1.25 for Xavier Worthy. But because Worthy kicked off late in the year and because he's attached to a great offense and there's some injury questions with it, like people are willing to kind of write that off. For the most part, he's going around pick 60 in Yahoo drafts. But that same sort of logic is not applied to Ricky Pearsall, who actually has a better excuse for not being productive because he was shot in the chest and he had all those injuries, things of that nature. So, and he's attached to an offense that, yeah, they don't have Patrick Mahomes, but talk about like projections wise, they're projected to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. So are the Chiefs. But again, both these top 10 like potential offenses this year. So I love that comparison by you. And the fact that there was like a 30+ pick gap between the two guys just doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, we are both all on board the Ricky Pearsall show for 2025. This show is going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we have two Chicago Bears players to talk about on the other side of this break. What could possibly go wrong? We'll get into it right after this. All right, we are back as promised. Yes, following the Bears' Super Bowl win on Sunday night in their preseason game. We got to talk to Chicago Bears here, Faraz, because you're a professional. You got in, I wasn't even going to claim this player, but you still got into the doc first, and you got this guy's name on the doc. Tell us about why Odunze, player I've never discussed before, I have no opinion about. Tell me why you think he's going to be a breakout candidate this year.
Oh man, listen, I don't know why you're so down on Odunze as a player, man. I really don't. But I will say that they're just, it's one of those player, talented player, bad situation types of things, and why he wasn't a great, rookie, right? And the offensive situation last year was just so bad. I truly believe that he's a good player, and one of the reasons why I know that, Matt, is just simply like I'll look at reception perception, man. I'm like, all right, well, like, how did he actually do? Like, when the stats are down, like, what am I doing? Like, am I seeing the right stuff? Like, I think he's a good player. Like, he looks like he's good. He looks like he belongs. And turns out, like, I was kind of right, and you kind of confirmed my priors there. But I just look at the situation from last year, and I look at the stats, right? I'm looking at Shane Waldron's offense when he was in Seattle, when JSN was drafted. And then I look at his offense when Odunze was drafted, right? And there's so many parallels, dude. It's crazy. 1.37 yards per route run for Odunze, his rookie year, 1.39 for JSN, right? And we all know JSN, what he did in year two, right? When he moved to a different offense. 19% first read target share for Odunze, 19% for JSN, his rookie year. 17% target share for Odunze, his rookie year, 16% for JSN. And, you look at Ben Johnson coming in now. going from Shane Waldron to Ben Johnson, huge 180, right? Johnson's already talking up Odunze. Like, I don't know if you heard his soliloquy on Odunze a couple weeks ago, talking about his route running, his ability to play X receiver, and all that. And
I
like,
heard it, pal. I'm saying it. I'm saying it to myself before I go to sleep every night.
So like and from all accounts, like he is the go-to wide receiver right now in training camp. And you look at Keenan Allen, Keenan Allen low-key commanded a 27% target share last year. That was 14th among all wide receivers. And the connection just wasn't there, between Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, number one. And number two, like, I just don't think, he was put in the right situations because of the offensive environment. 59 wide receivers ran 400 plus routes last year. Rome Odunze's 61.2% catchable target rate ranked dead last. 59th among those 59 wide receivers. But because the reports are saying that they're building a strong connection, like, if that number just even normalizes, right, it could be huge. So I'm somebody who's back in on Rome Odunze. I think that he is, like, if I had to like tell you, like, okay, who do I think is like the best pure wide receiver, who has the best like alpha potential, I think it's Rome. And I think an OC like Ben Johnson is going to be able to get that out of him. There's a little bit of a trust that I'm putting in here to Ben Johnson, but I do think he can right this ship. And I think Odunze can definitely turn it around and have a huge year too.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting that faith in there to Ben Johnson. A lot of people are as well. Again, putting together these kind of wisdom of the crowd projections. They were 15th there. Like, the Bears are going to have the 15th best offense in the NFL this year. That is definitely a big bump in the wisdom of the crowd, according, like, for Ben Johnson. Like, that's what we're talking about here. But listen, I'm in on this offense. I'm in on Rome Odunze. And look, obviously, Faraz, we're kidding about what Caleb and the Bears offense did in the preseason game. We know the Bills were playing backups. We know that is not like indicative of what's going to happen in the regular season. I think they could be an offense that gets off to a little bit of a slow start as everything comes together. But I just love it. I love the process, the way they've talked about, like, they put a bunch on Caleb's plate and then start paring it down to the stuff that he likes. That's exactly what Ben Johnson and these guys did with Jared Goff back in Detroit. So I love that part of it. And I loved a lot of what I saw, again, from a process standpoint of Caleb Williams in that preseason game, where, like, he gets to that third step in the drop and ball is out. He's very decisive. And yes, obviously, again, the defense is a backup defense, but still being decisive and, like, knowing where the reads are versus what type of coverage, like, that was good to see after what we saw as a rookie. So we need to see a lot more, of course, from Caleb to have full trust. And same with Rome Odunze too. But I do think that was a good sign. And also just worth noting the usage too. This is something I'm curious to kind of continue to track. Mike Florio of the NFL Network put this out. Very small sample size, but caught my eye. Each of the two Bears receivers were on the field for all 7 routes of the preseason game. DJ Moore 6 out wide, 1 in the slot. Rome Odunze 4 out wide, 3 in the slot. I would imagine, like, to me, I thought, because the way they've talked about him, you mentioned Ben Johnson talking him up as that X receiver. I thought Rome would be in the X more than DJ Moore would be, because I think that fits Rome's skill set. But we know that, like, Ben wants to get his best players in the positions to succeed. And the fact that, like, if Rome is going to do some slot stuff, which I expect he will, and I expect DJ will be more than, 6-1 in terms of that ratio. But that's only more good news for Rome Odunze. But I've talked enough about Odunze, probably to last a lifetime, but certainly in this segment here. I want to talk about Colston Loveland, who's my other pick here. And yeah, I scolded you about rookies and stuff like that. Well, I'm going to cheat here and put a rookie in here as well, because I think this guy is going to be a great fantasy pick this year, man. Like, that's another thing that I took away from that Bears offense in preseason. I think they could lead the league in 12 personnel this year. I think Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland will be on the field a ton together. And Colston Loveland is just so talented. He's a guy that can play multiple positions for this offense. I think they're going to set up layup targets for him. Like, Cole Kmet's going to do the Cole Kmet thing, and we even saw it in the preseason, like, stretch that seam out a little bit. But the guy that's going to be running these, like, quicker flat routes, yards after the catch, just be the easy button for Caleb Williams, which, again, we saw that is going to be Colston Loveland. So to me, if you miss out on Tucker Kraft, the next guy I want you looking at the tight end position is Colston Loveland. I just am very excited about his potential role here. And when there's 2 tight ends on the field, Usually one tight end doesn't get a lot of targets. I think that's going to end up being Cole Kmet. One tight end kind of concentrates the targets, and then the wide receivers get a lot more looks on a per route basis. So I actually think our 2 picks here together work in tandem pretty well for what I imagine this Bears offense to look like.
I actually moved Colston Loveland up my ranks a couple of spots, but it's not for the reason that you might think. It's because I've watched his rendition of Let Me Love You in front of the team probably 18 times. I don't know if you've seen it, Matt, but it was extremely impressive. You haven't seen it?
No.
Oh, you got to watch it, dude. No, you got to watch it. It's great. So, like rookies have these showcases, right? And they got to, we saw it, we saw like Aiden Hutchinson, have a great version of that. I think Colston Loveland's version wasn't as good, but it was up there. It was great rendition. I would highly recommend you checking it out. So I did end up boosting him a little bit in the ranks because of it. My only concern with Loveland here is that when naming the guys in his circle of trust, Ben Johnson did name Cole Kmet, and number 2, he did. He also named Olamide Zaccheaus too, and he ended up scoring a touchdown out of the slot this past weekend.
Olamide Zaccheaus was kind of smoking out there, bro. He looks pretty good.
I will say, I think my one concern for Loveland this season is, will he see the route participation that's required for him to be able to become that top 10 tight end this year, right? Like we were talking about it earlier. We want to potentially see there it is right there. You kind of pulled it up, guys. Great job with the producers, man. I love it. But yeah, 80% plus, right? That's kind of what you want to see. We're having that same issue in Buffalo with Dalton Kincaid, right? Where, you still have another tight end there who they love to run for whatever reason. They have Dawson Knox running a ton of routes and is preventing Dalton Kincaid from really breaking out and seeing that 80% route participation. He's kind of stuck in this no man's land of 50 to 70%, game in and game out. That's my only concern. But I think Loveland's a great talent. And he's a great route runner. And I think if he gets the role that we wanted to get, I think he can absolutely smash. That's just, one concern that I have going into year 1.
Yeah, I totally get it. I think he might be a guy that it takes a minute, it takes a minute for him to really get going there. You might not originally get that, but at some point I do think he's going to be a pretty big factor here for the Chicago Bears offense. And again, when I just look at the other tight ends available in that range, and he goes so late, dude, he goes after, he goes 120, he goes well after the top 15 players of the position. I just think he's a better upside bet than a lot of those guys. And sounds weird to say, famous last words. This is kind of an offense I want to be in on from a fantasy football perspective. When has that ever treated us wrong when we talk about the Chicago Bears before? We're going to take one last quick break here. When we come back, we've got 2 more wide receiver picks that are going to go at the very end of your typical redraft league. But we think these guys can break out. We're going to get to those 2 names right after this. All right, we are back. As promised, we have 2 super late round wide receiver picks for you for our breakout segment to land this plane here in Faraz. Full disclosure, these are 2 of my favorites. 2 of my little pet reception perception favorites, but I'm not sure if if the people will buy this. So we'll see if they come out of it. But all right, give us your first candidate here.
It would really be helpful if Josh Downs, the guy that I'm going with here, didn't have a hamstring injury going into the season. Like that, that's not what you want to see. And that's one of the knocks about Josh Downs. Like last year, he had some health issues, and then, he had the high ankle sprain, and, he had a couple, he was banged up a little bit. Not only that, his quarterback, Anthony Richardson, banged up, in and out of the lineup. When he was in the lineup, it wasn't great. So I get it. I understand why his ADP is where it is, right? At 128 on Yahoo. But I will say that he's a great player, right? So like when you have great players who are being drafted so low, it just takes a little bit of an improvement in situation, in luck, even to really get them to go into like where they need to be. And I truly believe in the right situation and circumstances, Josh Downs has the ability to be a top 15 fantasy wide receiver. Now, will that happen this year? I don't know, right? But I will say from an efficiency standpoint, he is literally one of the best wide receivers. He was 3rd among 100 wide receivers, qualifying wide receivers in targets per route run last season. Let me say that again. Target rate, 3rd. Okay, we're talking some really, really, really good wide receivers in that range, like all the household names. He was top 20 in yards per route run, first downs per route run, first read target percentage in this offense. Same offense, by the way. And he was also top 20 in expected fantasy points per route run last year. Now, Destin Adams, he's a Colts beat writer for A to Z Sports. He was just on my podcast today. And I asked him, like, hey, like, who do I want? If I'm a Josh Downs stan, like, who do I want to be the quarterback? And I'm assuming they're going to be announcing this quarterback, pick soon in terms of who their starter is going to be, Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. And, he said if he were to create a Venn diagram of like where Josh Downs is, he's actually in the middle. So like he is like the one wide receiver that both Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones has been targeting and being basically their favorite target, throughout training camp, which is great for me. Like I fully paused when he said that in the podcast. I took it all in. I was so excited, and he was the only guy that they said he would put that in, right? And Tyler Warren was kind of like next up. Michael Pittman was obviously there as well. But the fact that both quarterbacks are now, so I think, if you're looking at Anthony Richardson, there is a seemingly notable improvement in his skills in terms of accuracy in the intermediate part of the field. Now, he still has his issues, obviously, but there is a little bit of an improvement there. Daniel Jones, 3 of his wide receivers were near the top in catchable target percentage, which is very surprising when you bring up Daniel Jones, but it's true. So he's also somebody like who can get the ball to his wide receivers, whether you believe it or not. So I think the overall situation is going to be improved this year, regardless of which quarterback is named the starter. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that improvement with Anthony Richardson in the past game. So I think Josh Downs is somebody who, as long as he stays healthy, like obviously, he's going to be cutting it close in terms of making it to week 1 healthy. But once he's there, I do think and by all accounts, like from training camp, Josh Downs seemingly is the clear number 1 target. That's really what you want to hear in a relatively crowded, receiving room.
Oh, man. Listen, if I don't have a lot of Josh Downs on my teams this year and he goes off, I am going to totally be okay with that because like he's just one of my guys. Like I can be happy because he's smashing, and even if I have like no, and I will have some. I've already drafted some teams where he's on them, like that were early drafted teams, whatever. This is one of the best, like most unheralded receivers out there right now. 90th percentile success rate versus man coverage last year, 92nd against zone. He's awesome. He is just such a good player. I am worried, though, about specifically the targets per route run metric that you mentioned and the presence of Tyler Warren. Like, I just feel like Tyler Warren, for especially for Danny Dimes, is just going to be like that little binky security blanket, like a guy that just eats up targets underneath. And that might take away from some of the Josh Downs appeal. But listen, I love the player, man. I love the player, but I just wonder if this is too crowded. And like, what's the ceiling on the Colts offense? Like, they're the 20th best offense with this quarterback room. So again, I don't, he goes in a range where, like, as you mentioned, the overall ADP is nothing, 120 outside the top 120, whatever, take your shots. But man, I have just not been, I've just not been jacked about getting any of these Colts pass catchers, because I think it's really crowded. Like, people are doing the A.D. Mitchell's going to break out thing again. Tell me how that guy gets like footballs thrown to him, much less accurate footballs, much less is he better against zone coverage and settling down and all those things. So just a lot of questions on the Colts, and I'm not breaking any news there.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And Tyler Warren, like, he's somebody I'm targeting too, right? So like, I don't necessarily want to draft Tyler Warren and Josh Downs on the same fantasy team, right? Like, it's one or the other. Just like how I'm not going to draft like Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson, or even I don't even want Garrett Wilson and Justin Fields, right? It's like, when you're looking at these offenses, and that's one thing that I'm changing a lot going into this season, is I am very, very hyper focused on who those, which offenses are going to be the top offenses, which offenses are going to really be bad this year. And, focusing a lot on that, because it's really simple. Like, draft players on good offenses. Like, it's sometimes it's a lot simpler than you think. But sometimes these players, man, they got me in the chokehold. I got to draft them. Josh Downs is one of them.
Well, that perfectly transitions to my final pick here, which if I'm like trying to stay level about Josh Downs, I'm going to be a total hypocrite here and talk about Rashod Bateman. But listen, you just said it right there. Draft good players in good offenses. The Ravens are projected to be a top 10 offense by basic level. No. This is the thing, by like a top 2 offense by every source. And yet their number 2 wide receiver goes deep in the hundreds in fantasy football drafts. And he is a good player. Like, okay, maybe you don't buy what I'm selling with reception perception, success rates, and the fact that like he's been an awesome, I don't know why you're listening to the show if that's true, but thank you for listening to the show anyways. But seriously, but again, the guy is a really good route runner, separates at all 3 levels. But last year he proved it. Statistically, when he got his opportunities, he was awesome. 64 wide receivers had 40-plus catches last year at Faraz. Rashod Bateman had the highest percentage of those catches go for a first down or a touchdown. Super explosive, over 40% explosive play rate. And he saw 7.7% of his snaps from the slot, easily the lowest among that 40-plus reception club at the wide receiver position last year. I think his slot rate goes up this year because I think they will play more 11 personnel with DeAndre Hopkins in the mix. And Hopkins, I think, actually fits as more of a boundary player than he played a lot of X receiver. I don't think that's like the best use of him, but when he's just on the field for third downs and stuff, he'll line up at X and allow Bateman to move around a little bit more. And again, this is just taking a good player attached to a good quarterback that nobody else wants to draft. So listen, Bateman had between 700 and 800 yards last year. I think he is one of my, if I'm looking at like non-rookie wide receivers that go in the hundreds, I think he's one of my favorite bets to get to like over 900 this year. There's just more room for Rashod Bateman to grow. And yeah, I will be tweeting out, hell yeah, Rashod Bateman every single time he catches a football this year.
I would say, I think Rashod Bateman and Rashid Shaheed are probably my 2 highest rostered wide receivers in best ball. And for that reason, he had 9 touchdowns last year. Zay Flowers had 4. Mark Andrews had 11. And that goes to show, Bateman is somebody that, Lamar Jackson is looking for. And, he had more end zone targets than Zay Flowers last year, right? So, I personally think that I think you're right. And, even if you're not going off the reception perception stuff, like ESPN's open score last year, he was 12th among all wide receivers in open score, right? So, he's going so late in drafts that, if you're, obviously he's not somebody you're starting in week 1, but if you have him on your bench and you have bye weeks and stuff, why not go with somebody who has such a high ceiling any given week? Would you be surprised if Bateman goes off any given week, 125 yards and, 2 touchdowns? No, of course not. It's Lamar Jackson throwing the ball, And, he's removed from several injuries that he had in the past. By the way, when he got injured, I think it was in that Miami game, like several years ago, where he was just absolutely torching. I think he was going up against Xavier Howard or I don't remember who it was, but like he was absolutely just torching
Howard, yep.
like good corners. It was right, like just torching like these good corners, and it's just like he was a really, really good player, early round pick, great prospect. Like remember who he is, okay? And he had some injury issues, and I think there's a chance that these guys like bounce back, and I think Rashod Bateman, especially in basketball, oh my God, like he is a value there. And where he's going, he's in such a sweet spot too, because there's like nobody else I like in that range too. So, I think Bateman's a good pick. Even in redraft, he's somebody you can plug in and, get that ceiling and actually win a week for you.
Yeah, I just like truly believe there's more to him than what he's shown so far. And he already really had that like nice bounce back season last year. So just again, a misunderstood player that I will always tout as a potential breakout basically until he like retires. So with that, those are our 12 breakout candidates. Awesome show, Faraz. Really appreciate you doing this. Tell the people where they can find all of your great work across the internet here.
Honestly, man, this was so much fun. I had a blast. I appreciate you having me. Upper Hand Fantasy on Instagram. I created a blueprint where, if you had one draft this year, like where am I going, who am I drafting, how am I handling it? All you got to do, just follow me on Instagram at Upper Hand Fantasy. DM me the word blueprint, and I will send it to you for free.
Boom. There's a lot of people doing the hey, I'm a fantasy guy on social media type situation. A lot of people doing great work. There's a lot of people doing it. Nobody's been doing it better than Faraz over the last few years, man. You're awesome. Continue to crush it. Thank you so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. For all of you out there watching, listening, appreciate the hell out of you as well. If you could like and subscribe to the show, that would be fantastic. It would really make me feel when Rashod Bateman doesn't break out this year, Josh Downs doesn't break out this year, the fact that you subscribed to the show, whether it's on YouTube, your favorite podcast feed, that would actually make me feel so much better. What also makes me feel better is that we've got a big road trip coming up here this weekend. That is right, people. This weekend, Yahoo Fantasy kickoff at the Venetian Resort in Las Vegas from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. on both nights. You can catch me, Justin Boone, Scott Pianowski, Nate Tice, the whole, not just the fantasy crew, a bunch of the NFL crew as well at the Yahoo Sportsbook inside the Venetian. We're going to have a meet and greet, a fantasy Q&A, and on Saturday night, man, it is just going to be absolutely electric. Again, Friday, August 22nd, Saturday, August 23rd at 5 p.m. Pacific at the Yahoo Sportsbook inside the Venetian Resort, Las Vegas. Just like Faraz's blueprint, this thing is free 99. So no dollars spent to come. So just come on by, talk some fantasy, talk some football with us. Hell of a time it is going to be. Also, tomorrow, we will be back on this very podcast feed. Boomer Bust Week rolls on. Nate Tice joins the show to talk about some of this stuff I kept teasing today about, like, projected offenses versus ADP, all that stuff. It's going to be live on Tuesday. We're going to identify 6 offenses that you should be concerned that they might bust this year in 2025. Until then, we are out.